I found my wife's affair with her boss, and now she's suing me for half the $750, $0 inheritance I inherited from my dad, all while secretly draining our joint account of $200, $0 to fund her new life with her lover. Hello everyone. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Now, let's begin the video. Using a throwaway for obvious reasons, with certain specifics modified to preserve anonymity. I never thought I'd be the guy to catch his wife cheating, especially not in the most ridiculous, humiliating way possible. It was like something out of a bad movie. I found her in bed with her boss, of all people, and the whole thing was caught on a hidden camera I set up after noticing her suddenly acting strange. Honestly, I should have seen the signs earlier, but I kept convincing myself she was just stressed or busy. Still, deep down, I knew something was off. Her name's Jessica, and she's always been a bit bitchy, but I loved her. We'd been married for 5 years, and I thought we had a pretty good life. She was the kind of woman who'd spend hours shopping, throwing diva fits over the tiniest things, but she was also charming enough that I overlooked her flaws. Our life was comfortable, good job, nice house, a decent savings account. I inherited a hefty $750, $0 from my dad a few months back, which I kept mostly to myself, planning to use it for investments or maybe a big trip. Jessica, of course, knew about the inheritance, but I never thought she'd turn into some money-hungry monster. Things started changing about 3 months ago. She became more secretive with her phone, hiding it whenever I entered the room. She'd get defensive if I asked her about her day, and her attitude toward sex shifted from passionate to cold, almost like she was tired of me or just didn't care anymore. I caught her lying once about a business dinner she claimed was with her boss, Mark. She said they discussed some new project, but I found a receipt on her phone from a fancy restaurant that I knew wasn't part of any work dinner. The timing was weird and the bill was huge. That's when I started digging. I installed a hidden camera in the bedroom just to see what was really going on. I didn't want to believe my wife would cheat, but I was desperate for the truth. One night I finally saw her in our bed with Mark, the boss she always insisted was just a friend and mentor. They were naked, tangled up, and laughing like they didn't have a care in the world. It was sickening. I felt my stomach drop and my heart pounding in my chest. I had to sit down and breathe through the shock, the anger boiling inside me. That image burned into my mind and I knew my life was about to change forever. The worst part, I wasn't just hurt, I was furious. Furious at her betrayal, furious at myself for not seeing it sooner, and furious because I was about to lose everything I'd worked for. My inheritance, my marriage, the trust I'd placed in her, all of it was suddenly in jeopardy. I knew she was hiding something more too, because I'd noticed her draining our joint account of nearly $200, $0 over the last few weeks. She'd always been good at hiding her tracks, but I found bank statements showing transfers to some account I'd never seen before. When I confronted her about the money, she just rolled her eyes and dismissed it as business expenses or her own savings. Yeah, right. I was starting to piece everything together, the secret bank accounts, her cold attitude, the late nights and lies. But what really made my blood boil was realizing she was planning her escape, probably with her lover, Mark, and the inheritance I was still legally entitled to. That's when I decided I'd had enough. I couldn't just sit back and let her drain me dry, cheat on me, and then turn around and sue me for half my inheritance, which she knew I hadn't even touched yet. It was time to fight back. I started planning my next move, knowing that this wasn't just about revenge. It was about getting what was rightfully mine and making her pay for what she'd done. The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. I wasn't just dealing with a cheating wife anymore. I was facing a woman who was willing to lie, manipulate, and steal to get what she wanted. Jessica had always been bitchy, but her real colors showed through when she thought she could get away with everything. She'd always been good at hiding her true nature behind a pretty face and a sharp tongue, but now she was exposing herself as someone I barely recognized. After discovering the affair, I knew I had to act fast. I started gathering evidence, screenshots of bank transactions, her secret messages with Mark, pictures from the hidden camera. I also hired a private investigator just to make sure I had every detail right. Turns out, Jessica had been planning her escape for months. She'd been funneling money into some offshore account, probably to fund her new life with Mark. I found emails where she talked about starting fresh and getting away from the mess, her words, not mine. She was planning her move, and I was the last thing in her way. Meanwhile, Jessica kept up her act. She'd come home late, throw tantrums, lie about where she'd been. She told me she was working extra hours at her job, and when I pressed her about the money, she kept insisting it was for family emergencies or investments. She knew I was onto her, but she played innocent, acting like I was crazy. That was her game: lie, deny, deflect, but I had enough. I started to see her for what she really was, a manipulative, selfish woman who was willing to destroy our life for her own benefit. One night I decided to confront her directly. I called her into the study, laid out all the evidence I'd collected, and watched her face drain of color. Her eyes darted around, trying to come up with excuses. She told me the affair was just a misunderstanding, that Mark was just a friend, and the money was for our future, her favorite line. I told her I knew about the affair, the money she'd been draining, and her plans to run. Her response: she called me paranoid, said I was overreacting, and that I was ruining everything because I didn't trust her. That's when I realized her lies were endless. It hit me hard. I felt a mix of anger, betrayal, and helplessness. How could I have missed all the signs? How could I have trusted her after everything? I was crushed, but I knew I couldn't let her get away with it. I had to do something, and fast. I started thinking about my options: legal action, exposing her to her boss, maybe even taking back some control of the inheritance before she managed to drain it completely. I couldn't let her take everything, not just the money, but my dignity, my future, my peace of mind. I spent the next few days researching my rights. I found out that I could potentially sue her for fraud and breach of trust, especially since she was secretly draining our joint account. I also discovered that I could contest the inheritance if I proved she was attempting to defraud me or if she was spending money illegally. It was a complicated mess, but I was determined to protect what was mine. I realized I'd been naive to think our marriage was just about love. It was also a business, and she was trying to bankrupt me while pretending everything was fine. Jessica was still acting like she had a perfect plan, but I was already one step ahead. I knew I had to act quickly before she managed to disappear with Mark and my money. I started consulting with lawyers, preparing to take legal action, and gathering all the evidence I could find. I knew this was going to be a long, ugly fight, but I was no longer going to be the passive husband sitting by while she played her games. I was going to fight for what's mine, even if it meant tearing her entire facade apart. The biggest shock: I realized I wasn't even angry anymore, just numb. I was hurt, yes, but mostly I felt betrayed in a way I couldn't describe. The woman I loved, the woman I married, was now a stranger, and I was about to make her pay for what she'd done. I didn't know how this would end, but I knew I couldn't let her walk away with my inheritance or my dignity. I had to stop her before she drained every last penny and disappeared forever. The more I dug into her financials, the more I uncovered just how deep her lies went. Jessica had been secretly transferring money into that offshore account for months, probably even before I inherited the $750, $0. She'd always been good at hiding her tracks, but I found enough evidence to prove she was plotting her escape, and that she was doing it with Mark, her boss, the guy she swore was just a mentor. Yeah, right. I had the receipts, the emails, the bank statements. It was all there, plain as day. She was draining us dry, and I was furious. I remember the night I decided I'd had enough. I sat her down again, this time with everything laid out in front of her. I told her I knew she was cheating, stealing, and planning to leave me high and dry. Her face twisted into this angry, bitchy sneer, and she started lying faster than I could keep up. She insisted Mark was just a friend, that she was only talking to him, that the money was for some stupid investment or a surprise for me. She even had the nerve to cry, telling me I was overreacting, that I was paranoid, that I didn't trust her. I saw right through her lies. She was trying to manipulate me into backing down. But I wasn't backing down. I'd already gone too far. I told her flat out that I was going to take her to court, that I was going to expose everything. I wanted her to understand that I wasn't going to let her get away with this. I told her I'd fight to get my inheritance back, and I'd sue her for fraud if I had to. She scoffed, told me I was being ridiculous, but I saw the panic in her eyes. She knew I was serious. That's when she started to get really bitchy, yelling, cursing, calling me crazy and possessive. She refused to admit she was doing anything wrong, insisted I was just jealous and insecure. Meanwhile, I was collecting more evidence, making arrangements with my lawyer and planning the next steps. I knew I had to act fast before she managed to drain the last of the money, or worse, disappear with Mark forever. I also had a feeling she might try to turn this around on me, make me look like the bad guy, so I started recording everything she said. Deep down, I felt betrayed beyond words. Jessica had always been a bitch, sharp-tongued, demanding, difficult, but I never thought she'd stoop this low. I was losing my trust in her, losing my sense of the woman I thought I knew. The betrayal cut so deep I couldn't even cry anymore. I was just numb, waiting for the next move. I was already imagining her leaving with Mark, living some glamorous new life funded by my inheritance, while I was left to pick up the pieces. It was a sickening thought, but I refused to let her take everything without a fight. So I made my decision. I'd hire the best lawyer I could find, file the necessary papers, and start legal proceedings. I'd also look into freezing her accounts and possibly even getting a court order to prevent her from transferring any more money. I wasn't going down without a fight. I knew she'd try to spin this, call me crazy, accuse me of being controlling, maybe even threaten to sue me for emotional distress. But I was prepared. I'd been betrayed, yes, but I'd also become determined. Jessica thought she could lie, cheat, and steal her way out of this mess, but I was about to turn the tables and make her regret every second she betrayed me. In the meantime, I started documenting everything: her lies, her financial transactions, her messages with Mark. I knew this was only the beginning. The next step was to confront her with the evidence in court, to show her I wasn't going to be a victim anymore. I'd protect what was mine, and I'd make sure she paid for her betrayal. It was a bitter pill to swallow, but I realized I had no choice. I had to be the one to fight back, to stand up for myself and my inheritance. That's what I was going to do. No matter how bitchy she got, no matter how much she lied, I was going to expose her for who she really was: a manipulative, selfish woman willing to destroy everything for her own gain. The legal process moved faster than I expected once I handed everything over to my lawyer. I knew I had a mountain of evidence: screenshots, bank statements, her own words in those emails, everything pointing to her scheming and betrayal. I also had recordings of her yelling at me, calling me paranoid and insecure, which I kept as backup. The lawyer warned me it wouldn't be easy, especially since she was already trying to spin her story and claim I was overreacting, but I was determined. I wanted her to understand she couldn't just steal from me, cheat on me, and then walk away with my inheritance. Jessica's reaction was classic: denial, deflection, outright hostility. She told everyone that I was controlling and paranoid, that I'd been spying on her, and that I was just jealous of her success. She even tried to turn her boss, Mark, against me, claiming I was trying to ruin her career. But Mark wasn't stupid. I had enough evidence to prove their affair, and I knew he'd be called as a witness if it came to court. Jessica's lies were falling apart piece by piece. All she could do was scream and threaten to sue me for emotional distress or defamation. Honestly, I didn't care. I just wanted her out of my life and my money back. Meanwhile, I took steps to freeze her accounts and prevent her from draining any more of the inheritance. I worked with the bank and my lawyer to get a court order. I also filed a lawsuit for breach of trust, fraud, and emotional damages. It was clear she'd been planning her escape for months. She'd hidden her true intentions behind a facade of bitchy sarcasm and lies. I knew I needed to act fast before she managed to transfer the rest of the money or disappear entirely. One night, I caught her trying to withdraw more funds from the offshore account. She was panicked, trying to cover her tracks, but I had already alerted my lawyer and the bank. They froze everything just in time. That was a huge relief. At least I knew she couldn't drain the rest of the inheritance while I was fighting her in court. It also made me realize how deep her deception went. She'd been planning this for months, probably even before I inherited the money. The emotional toll was brutal. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and furious. Jessica had always been a bitch, but her betrayal went beyond anything I could have imagined. I kept replaying that night with her and Mark in my head, trying to process how someone I loved could turn into such a manipulative, selfish bitch. I was angry at her, but I was also angry at myself for trusting her so blindly. How did I miss all the signs? How did I let her get away with so much? The worst part was knowing that she'd probably be living her new life with Mark, funded by my money, while I was left to pick up the pieces. Despite everything, I refused to give up. I was determined to get my inheritance back and hold her accountable. I started preparing for the court case, gathering witnesses, and lining up experts to testify about her financial deception. I knew she'd try to make herself look innocent, but I had enough evidence to prove she was lying through her teeth. I also reached out to some close friends, asking if they'd be willing to testify about her behavior and her attempts to manipulate everyone around her. I wanted her to see that I wasn't going down without a fight. In the meantime, Jessica kept up her bitchy attitude, throwing tantrums, refusing to admit any wrongdoing, and trying to gaslight me into doubting my own judgment. She'd scream that I was ruining her life, accuse me of harassment, and threaten to sue me for defamation. But I didn't care. I knew the truth, and I knew I had the law on my side. I just had to hold on until the court date, keep fighting, and make sure she paid for her lies and betrayal. Every day felt like a battle. I was exhausted, emotionally drained, but I also felt a strange sense of clarity. I realized I'd been a fool to trust her so completely, but I also learned something crucial. I had to be more careful, more guarded, and more aware of who I was really dealing with. Jessica wasn't just a bitchy wife. She was a con artist, a manipulator, and someone who would do anything to get what she wanted. And I was the one who had to stop her before she took everything I had left. The court date finally arrived, and I felt like I was walking into a battlefield. I was nervous, sure, but mostly I was furious. Everything was laid out in front of the judge. My evidence, her lies, her attempts to drain my inheritance, her affair with Mark, the secret offshore account. I had everything organized, every document, every recording, every email. Jessica looked nervous too, but her typical bitchy attitude was still there, rolling her eyes, trying to act like she was the victim. She kept insisting I was making everything up, that I was paranoid, that her affair and the money drain were just misunderstandings. My lawyer went first, laying out the case for breach of trust, fraud, and emotional damages. He presented the bank statements, the emails, the recordings. The judge listened carefully, asked questions, and seemed to see through her lies. Jessica's face was pale, her bravado crumbling as we laid out the facts. She tried to deny everything, but it was obvious she was cornered. Her excuses sounded more and more hollow. I felt a strange sense of relief, knowing that I was finally exposing her for what she'd been doing all along. Then, I took the stand. I told the court about finding her in bed with Mark, about her lies, about the money she'd been stealing. I explained how her betrayal had shattered my trust and how she'd been planning her escape for months. I looked her right in the eyes and told everyone how she'd manipulated me, how she'd lied and cheated to get her way. I saw her squirm under the scrutiny, her bitchy mask slipping away. When I finished, the judge seemed convinced. I could see a hint of understanding in her expression. Jessica tried to fight back, of course. She claimed I was overly jealous, that I'd been spying on her, and that I'd fabricated the evidence. But her voice was shaky, her words inconsistent. The judge wasn't buying it. After a tense deliberation, the court ruled in my favor. She was ordered to return my inheritance, pay damages for her breach of trust, and reimburse the money she'd illegally transferred. The judge also issued a court order freezing her remaining assets to prevent her from disappearing with any more of my money. The aftermath was a whirlwind. Jessica was furious, screaming and cursing as she left the courtroom. She tried to threaten me, call me a crazy stalker, but I just sat there, exhausted but relieved. I'd won, at least for now. I knew this wasn't the end of her schemes, but I also knew I'd done everything I could to protect what was mine. I felt a strange mix of anger and sadness. Anger that she could be so manipulative, sadness that I'd trusted her at all. In the days that followed, I started the process of rebuilding. I contacted the bank to ensure all her accounts were still frozen, and I began the long process of reclaiming my inheritance. I also reached out to a therapist to help me deal with the emotional fallout. I realized I'd been through a hell of a lot, but I was stronger than I thought. Jessica's betrayal had shattered my world, but it also taught me a hard lesson. Trust must be earned, not given blindly. I had to be more cautious, more careful with who I let into my life. Looking back, I can't believe I let her get away with so much for so long. But I also learned that even when you think everything is perfect, you need to be vigilant. Jessica was a bitch, cruel, manipulative, selfish, and she almost destroyed me with her lies and schemes. But I fought back. I stood my ground, fought for my rights, and now I'm finally starting to pick up the pieces. It's a long road ahead, but I know I'll be okay. I just hope anyone else out there who's been betrayed like this learns to trust their instincts, stand up for themselves, and never let someone like her take everything they've worked for. In the aftermath of everything, I've had a lot of time to reflect on what happened and what I've learned from this nightmare. Jessica's betrayal didn't just cost me money or my trust. It shattered my sense of security and made me question everything I thought I knew about her and myself. Still, I'm glad I fought hard, and I won back what was rightfully mine. The inheritance, the respect, the sense that I wasn't just some fool who got played. Facing her, exposing her lies, and finally seeing her for what she truly was, a manipulative, selfish bitch, gave me a clarity I never had before. I've come to realize that betrayal cuts deeper than just money. It's about trust, about the promises you make to someone you love. Jessica betrayed all of that, and I won't pretend it doesn't hurt. But I've also learned that being betrayed doesn't mean the end of everything. It's a hard lesson in vigilance, in trusting but verifying, and in standing up for yourself when someone tries to walk all over you. I've started to rebuild my life, piece by piece, and I'm determined not to let her destroy my future. One thing I want to say to anyone reading this: if you're in a situation where you suspect your partner is cheating or stealing from you, don't ignore the signs. Trust your instincts, gather evidence, and don't be afraid to stand up for yourself. It's easy to get blinded by love or comfort, but if someone is betraying you, you need to fight back. Protect your assets, your dignity, and your sanity. Because at the end of the day, no amount of money or love is worth losing yourself over. I also want to remind myself, and anyone else, that even when betrayal seems impossible to recover from, there's always a way forward. It might be messy, it might be painful, but you can come out on the other side stronger. I've learned that the hard way. Jessica thought she could manipulate and steal her way out of this mess, but she underestimated the power of standing up for yourself and fighting for what's right. Now I'm focusing on healing, on rebuilding what's left, and on making sure I never let someone take that much from me again. I don't hate Jessica, at least not anymore. I just feel sorry for her, for the person she's become. I hope she finds whatever happiness she's chasing, but I know I won't be part of that anymore. I've learned to be cautious, to trust myself more, and to never let anyone betray me again. In the end, I still believe in love and trust, but I know now that both must be earned, not blindly given. That lesson is one I'll carry with me for the rest of my life. And even though I feel battered and betrayed, I also feel free from her lies, her manipulations, her bitchy attitude. I've taken back control, and I'm finally ready to move on. So to anyone out there who's going through something similar, stay strong, stay vigilant, and remember that your worth isn't determined by someone else's lies. Stand up, fight for what's yours, and never settle for less than the respect and honesty you deserve. Because in the end, that's what truly matters.